Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about listening in Japanese. And for a lot of people, this is the hardest single aspect of the language. Learners of language, I think, come on a sliding scale from people who find the audio learning particularly easy to those who find it extremely difficult. So on the one hand, we have people who say, well, I listen to songs and watch anime all the time, and really, I pretty much understand everything I hear. But as soon as I get a page of written Japanese, I just don't know where I am. And then there are people on the other side who say, if you give me a book, provided it's at my level, or a game with a lot of text, I don't have any trouble at all. I can watch anime, provided it has subtitles. But give me raw, spoken Japanese, and I absolutely don't know where I am. Maybe material that I have no trouble with at all, provided there are subtitles, but take them away, and it's like hitting a brick wall. I don't know how to get through it. Now, most people are probably somewhere in between those two, but a lot of people, I think, find listening to be a barrier. So, if that's the case, what do we do about this? Understanding the structure, having vocabulary, are all extremely helpful to listening, but in the end, cold listening is a skill in itself, and we don't learn it by anything other than cold listening. So, how do we get started? Of course, we, from a very early stage in organic Japanese, start listening to audio of the anime we've been through with subtitles, and I think after an early struggle, most of us don't find much trouble with listening to soundtracks that we've already understood, to comprehensible, known material. And that does help to prepare us for cold listening, but it doesn't get us all the way there. In the early stages, it's a good idea to listen to material even simpler than our early anime, when we're at the early anime stage, without subtitles. Perhaps something like the Anpanman videos, which are made for small children, but do in fact have quite interesting stories. And perhaps something even simpler, like Shimajiro or Pabu Project. I'll put links to some of these things in the information section below. At this stage, it's fine to keep backtracking, hear the same bit of audio several times until you get the idea of what the characters are saying. So this is the really early stage of starting to hone our listening alongside listening to known audio that we've worked through with subtitles. There comes a point when we need to work on real anime without subtitles. And how do we go about that? Well, there's a principle at work here, and I think we need to discuss it. I've talked about tolerance of ambiguity in the past, but this goes alongside something else that I call the illusion of understanding. It's perfectly possible sometimes to hear and ingest something and believe that one's understood it when one hasn't in fact understood it at all. You see instances of this with people working in their native language. If you've ever had a discussion, an intellectual argument with someone, and you've explained something carefully to them, and they appear to have understood, believe that they've understood, but reply to something quite different from what you said. They've picked up on some of the words in what you said and built it into something that they're already familiar with and replied to that. This is the illusion of understanding. They've listened to what you've said. They know the language. They believe that they've understood what you said, but in fact, they haven't. Now, this sort of thing happens all the time in native language and in second languages. And in many respects, it's a very bad thing. It's what the textbooks do when they tell you that kohi ga suki means I like coffee. They're actually encouraging you to have the illusion of understanding. If you try to break it down, work out what the ga does, what the da does, and why on earth the adjectival noun suki can be the verb like, you're not going to get anywhere, because this isn't exact understanding, this is the illusion of understanding, and if we pursue this as the textbooks do, we're going to end up being very confused about how Japanese fits together, what the particles do, what words do, how the whole language works. But people have learned Japanese like this by essentially cultivating the illusion of understanding and gradually refining it down into real understanding. And while I don't recommend this for learning Japanese, for learning the language, as a matter of fact, it does have value for listening. There are quite a few non-native learners, especially of English, who learn the language essentially by watching television. And first of all, they don't understand it very well, but provided they're prepared to sit back and enjoy the show, using whatever English they've got to understand as much as they can, and often some of the time getting it wrong and perhaps making up what people mean, gradually, over time, it settles down to being some kind of an understanding of English. I don't recommend this as a means of learning language, but it's actually something that's almost necessary in learning to hear language. We get a huge boost from knowing how the language really works, but then when we start listening to things raw and at full speed, we have to cultivate a somewhat different attitude. It is probably possible to learn to listen in the way that most people probably go about doing this raw listening, and that's treating it as an exercise and worrying all the time, what am I getting out of this? Did I learn much from that session? That sort of thing. But this really isn't the way to pick it up. What you need to do is actually try to suspend your desire for precision in learning to listen. There's a great deal to be said for sitting back and watching the show, understanding what you can understand, filling in what you can't as best you can. After all, when you use subtitles, even if you're past the stage where you're looking up a couple of words in every sentence, you still have to look up probably several words in every anime. You're not going to be able to do this when you're listening at full speed. You have to be able to get what you can from what you can hear. And a great deal of the skill of listening is, in fact, speed. You find, as you start to listen at full speed, that you're often filling in things slightly retrospectively. You hear the sentence somebody says, and a fraction of a second afterwards, you work out what a couple of the words must have been from the way the sentence ended. And this is an absolutely vital skill of listening. You do it all the time in your native language without even really realizing it. You can do it in Japanese too, but you can't do it very fast. It's building up the ability to pick them up quickly, to work out what the sentence must have been a split second after you hear it. These are the kind of skills that are involved in actually learning to listen. And the illusion of understanding is actually terribly important here. Getting a general idea of what's said, it isn't even necessarily right all the time, keeps us powering forward, because we shouldn't be treating it as an exercise. We should be treating it the way people who learn English from watching television treat it. They're watching television mostly not to learn English, but because they want to watch the show. So this ties up with what I'm continually saying about immersion. You've got to build a zone where the English translation doesn't exist, where you can't actually watch it in English. So if you want to see it, you watch it in Japanese. When you want to kick back, when you don't want to study, when you want to relax, you just sit back and watch your anime and get out of it whatever you can get out of it. Use the pictures to help you. Use context to help you. And if necessary, watch an anime that you've seen before, preferably quite a long time ago, perhaps in English or your native language. You don't want to have watched it recently so that you know exactly what's going to happen, but if you watched it a couple of years ago, you can use that knowledge to help enhance what you're hearing. Because the truth is that unless you're very good at hearing, unless you're one of these people who happens to be gifted with good hearing ability for language, and most of us aren't, it's quite a long struggle to turn that stream of sound into something comprehensible when it's cold and on the fly. Now there are different levels of doing this, and I think one should try all of them. Use different ones at different times. For example, you can watch with subtitles but at full speed, so that fundamentally you're trying to hear what's going on, but you're able to look at the subtitles and get some clues as to what the words are. You may not even be able to read them that fast. But the importance in this exercise is to keep your hands off the keyboard. Make sure that you're watching it at full speed. But then there is the all-important skill of just watching the anime at full speed and getting whatever you can. And this should be an important part of your Japanese life. You can have more complicated anime that you watch with subtitles, because you know you're not going to get the point of them without subtitles at this stage. And then some easier ones that you watch without subtitles and just relax. Don't worry about what you can't get. Just enjoy what you can get. And the most important word in that is enjoy. Don't look at this as trying to learn Japanese. Look at it as growing up in Japanese, enjoying your Japanese childhood. Having fun with anime in Japanese, because that's the only way to have fun with anime. There isn't any anime in English in your world. And that's a happy thing, because all your anime is the real thing. It seems like a very simple piece of advice, but I think it is the most fundamental of all. Don't spend your time watching anime trying to learn Japanese, especially when it's without subtitles. Then you're not adding anything to your Anki, you're not doing anything study-like, you're just sitting back and enjoying the anime, the way children of your linguistic age are doing all over the world. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my gold Kokeshi patrons, my producer angels who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere, all the people who are helping us to go forward into a new world of Japanese adventure. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Class dismissed.